so this is our sheet screen.
Special PowerPoint.
Okay. So there was a work written by the name of Kuzari. I'm not sure if you've heard of it. It's one of the classic philosophical works in Jewish thought. And the concept of the work is a king who is seeking philosophical truth. And he has a conversation, a dialogue with a rabbi, and he asks these questions, and he gets answers, and that basically forms the very important foundations of Jewish philosophy and Jewish thought. Anyway, his question to the Jewish rabbi was, who do Jewish people consider to be pious? Okay, what's a pious person in the eyes of the Torah, of Jewish people? And his answer was a very odd answer. He says, a person who rules with justice and whose commands are obeyed. So he's a ruler, he's just, and people listen to him. And the king says, no, maybe you don't understand me. I didn't ask who's a good ruler or who's a good king. I asked you, what do the Jewish people consider to be a pious individual? And the answer is the one that's printed over here. The pious man is basically a leader. He writes the word prince for translation, but a moshel, a ruler, who, when we say that he's a ruler, he rules over his senses, his mental and physical facilities. He rules over his senses, his emotions, his desires, his physical powers, his thoughts, and speech. That's what we mean by a pious person. So actually, the concept of a ruler and the concept of a pious person are actually very much related. In other words, to become a great person, what we consider to be pious, someone who rules over himself. He has complete control, and basically, which is, the title for this class is self-mastery. A complete self-master is someone who's considered a pious person. And the same way you would rule over subjects, ruling over yourself is the first step towards greatness. And that was his answer. It was a very deep answer. I heard Rabbi again, who was a speaker in Israel, and he kind of expanded on a certain, you've heard of him? So he kind of expands on a certain topic, actually having very much to do with what we're reading about in the Torah and these parshos, about Yosef and Yehuda. When they met together, the Medrash says that two kings were coming to fight with each other. Yosef and Yehuda, they had this fierce, they didn't really combat in the end, but Yehuda was coming to fight, and Yosef had to stand up, and in the end they kind of ended up admitting who he was. But the Medrash calls Yosef a king. Now, Rabbi again expounds on what did it mean king? What was royalty? What was kingly about Yosef? And he says, if you think about Yosef, think about his life. Here's a person who, 17 years old, is sold to slavery by his own family. He's abandoned by his family. He's forsaken by his people. He's a young teenager in a foreign land, a slave no less, and there he's tempted. He's tempted by a very, very severe test, a very difficult test, right? And Mrs. Potiphar, who of course was trying to seduce him, who, and she threatened him. First of all, she said, if you go ahead and acquiesce, I'll give you wealth, I'll give you riches, I'll give you everything. And if you don't go along with it, you'll be in prison. And she threatened him. She put him through, and here's a person again, forsaken by his people. They don't care about him. Sold him as a slave. He's not in his home. He's 17 years old, or 18 at that point, and he chooses imprisonment. Okay, so now he's in jail. So he starts off being abandoned by his people, sold to slavery. Now he's in jail. Now you would think a person who went through all that would be quite bitter, right? You'd think quite bitter. 12 years later, and it calls it a bar. The jail calls it a pit, literally a dungeon. He wasn't in a jail like, with air conditioning, right? He was in a dungeon, okay, as literally as you can imagine. After 12 years in this dungeon, he's called to Paro. And Paro's so amazed by this personality, because he's speaking with nobility, he seems serene, he seems content. He's speaking with this nobility, and he says, what is this person here? He says, you are fit to rule. You are fit to be a king. He also had his faith. He took no credit for his dream interpretation. He said, El Kim Yanesh Shalom Paro. He says, God is the one. He had this certain sense. Paro said, if you can rule over yourself to the point that none of this is affecting you, all of life's circumstance, which you would think is like the ultimate, betrayal. Life is betraying you in every way, shape, and form. And here you are with this just control. Then if you can control yourself in that way, you are fit to rule. And how the story finishes off is Yosef now has that opportunity for sweet revenge. His brothers come to Mitzrayim. They need food. He's the boss. He's the big shot. He has a chance to give them back. They ruined his life. He left 18, and this is 12 years later, more. Right? His life was absolutely ruined. he has the opportunity for revenge, and instead he says the most amazing things, and I actually translated the psukim here on the handout. Al tayatzvu, don't be distressed, don't reproach yourself, so I guess that means don't get angry that you sold me here. It was God that sent me here. Vayishalcheni Elokim lefnechem, in the third verse. God sent me here, it wasn't you. And the last one, he says it again. So it was not you, you weren't the ones who sent me here. You thought it was you? No. It was Elokim. It was Hashem who sent me here. How can a person have that perspective, despite all of life's circumstance, and to see past all of that and come to the point of just clarity and just seeing things so clearly that no, it's God, I have nothing to do with you. I have nothing against you. I don't hold any grudge. And they were afraid. They were afraid they were going to get it back, especially after Yaakov dies. It says they approached him again. You're sure you're not going to get this back now? They understood that they deserved something back, and he somehow saw past all that. Okay, this is what we call self-mastery. This is what we call being above all of life's circumstance, all of the disappointments, all the frustrations in life. To be able to be completely above all of that and just see things clearly. That is called self-mastery, and that's really if you want to say the end goal, the end result, what we're trying to get at, it's really heading in that direction. That's where we want to get to the point where we are above everything else. We all know this. Happiness is not about what you have; it's about your outlook, right? You know that, right? And wealth is about what you have and what you aspire to. It's not about what you like. It's what you realize what you have, and not what you want, right? And all these other things we know all this to be true, but for some reason, to get to that point for real, it's a tremendous challenge. So this is what we consider to be greatness. This is why, by the way, he was worthy of being a leader. He was worthy of being a king. One of the Mashiachs is going to come out of Yosef for this reason. Actually, leadership does come from these sources. As opposed to the Medrash says that our leaders, and then at the end of days, the leaders are going to be like a dog. Have you heard this before? Mm-hmm. Right, a dog. When you walk a dog, who's in front? The dog, right? So if you come from Mars and you look down and you see a person walking his dog, you say, oh, the dog is leading, right? Right? But of course, after every corner, right, the dog turns around and says, okay, which way are you going now? Oh, you're going that way, okay. That's the way our politicians work, right? They're not leading, they're looking, okay, well, what's going to get me the most votes? How am I get reelected, right? That's not called a leader, right? That's a follower who just, And
the person from Mars would see who cleans up after the dog and picks up the stuff.
I think that's part of it. I think that's part of it. Very good. Excellent. Exactly. So that's our politicians today, and that's our leaders. But a real leader in the eyes of Torah is a leader who actually leads, who leads his flock, who has a direction, and he has to be able, of course, to lead over himself before he can lead others. Okay, so this is the concept of greatness, and this is really, self-mastery in a nutshell is being in control, being on top of everything, and really to get. Do you need a writing utensil?
Oh no.
No, you're good. Okay, so being in control is actually a two-step process. We're not going to be able to get all of it right now, but to get a basic gist of what we're talking about, there's the external and there's the internal. Okay, so external, for example, in Kelm. Everyone heard of Kelm? Kelm was a yeshiva that was, if character trait is a field, it was their thing. It was the topic they worked on there. So in Kelm, they used to say that your face is a reshus harabah, is a public domain. In other words, no matter what's going on internally, you may have a lot of struggles, you may have a lot of frustrations, you may have a lot going on. When you meet a person, there's no reason for you to be, pouring all that on the person, who you're meeting. You have an obligation to show, it's Rishus Harabim. He has every right to get a smile. He has every right to get a proper hello. He has he deserves all the things that humanity deserves. And just because internally you're having struggles doesn't mean externally other people have to deal with that. So that's the first thing they taught in Kelm, externally. And as we know, externals help influence the internal. So the first step is externally. Okay, people are having a rough time inside, you're burning up, you want to blow up, right? So yes, it's not enough to just try to externally remain calm and collected. You have to work internally too. But the first step is external. Recognize the external is required to be, regal, noble, etc. And obviously, the second step is internally working on figuring out what it is that's maybe the struggle, what's taking away your serenity and working on it. And usually here is where bitachon, faith, is very much interrelated to character development. Because when a person has proper bitachon and sees it just like Yosef did, that it's not you who brought me here, it was Hashem, having that outlook can change everything. It's a total shift. And that's really where it's really very much linked. So bitachon is not a separate field, it's very much related to midos and character development. So that's one of the things we learned from Yosef. Yosef had that ability to see past all the circumstances. He had the bitachon, he had the clarity of mind. Okay, the second point we see from here, and the word melech in particular, the word king, melech, which means king, is made up of three letters, mem, lamed, and chaf. So I put together here on the second page some of the sources point out that they actually stand for three faculties of our bodies, if you will: the moach, lev, and kaved. Okay, the brain, the heart, and the liver. Now, the brain refers to the intellect of the person. The heart usually represents the emotion, and the liver refers to the blood, usually, which is the actual physical, bringing things to life. So first you think it, then you feel it, and then you act it out. That's the idea. So for many people, right, the first two is the big problem for them. The mem lamed, getting the intellect to act first and to be in control, and only then the emotion. For many people, it's the opposite. The emotion takes over first, the intellect kind of kicks in somewhere a little later, and they're already sprung into action. And from here we see if you want to be successful, and all we're talking about, you have to have the intellect has to lead, and that's why it's melech, the word ruler and leader and self-mastery. All this comes from the same concept that the intellect has to be the boss. Now, it doesn't mean a person shouldn't have emotion, and that's the human element of what the person is. But the leader, the one who gets things started, is the intellect. I've seen so many times where arguments and fights break out between people because they jump. I mean, they see something going on and they're just too quick to get excited. You know, he said what, and they're already in the fight before they had a chance to even analyze all the elements and all that's going on, all the background. They're already in the argument. They're like, you know, full steam ahead into the fight, and sometimes, of course, that brings on the other side to act with equal. You know, they say that it's kamar panam, whatever you show, the other side shows back, and then they have a full-blown argument. So the first step is just, you know, use intellect first, let the intellect kind of lead the way, and the emotion kicks in second. You know, Yosef had every reason to hold a grudge, he had every reason to be frustrated. Right? Obviously, he was leading with his mind, with his intellect, and that's why he was able to see all past all these things. Okay, so this is a very, very important, easy way to remember melech, which is moach, lev, and kaved. Okay, and I think the third lesson from this whole story is, you know, a person should realize that what are his drives and what are his desires in life. You know, if you think about it, what do you think is drive? Let's say, I mean, I don't know about you guys. Probably have better thoughts than I do. But I know most people I know. You ask them, what do you aspire for? What do you want in life? You know, usually we have certain things we're thinking about. Yeah, we want to redo the kitchen, or you see that sports car go by. Oh, yeah, I need to get me one of those, right? That's what I mean. I think typically that's what's going through people's mind. Men, maybe women have other things. You know, the dress. I don't know what. Right? Certain things are going through, and we're aspiring to certain things. And if you ask yourself, what is it that's pulling you towards that thing? You'll often discover that it's your heart is pulled towards certain things, and almost always the heart is pulled after what we call kinat, taiva, and kavod. Okay, there's a Mishnah in Pirkei Avos that says the three things that pull you out of this world are kinat, taiva, and kavod. Kinat means jealousy, taiva means lust, and kavod means honor. Usually, the things you want and things you or all of us that we aspire for naturally are things that come from kinat, taiva, and kavod. Okay, this is by nature, and it's sad, right? And these are the things the Mishnah says, this is what takes us out of the world, takes us out of this world, takes us out of the next world, right? A jealous person is never going to be happy. He won't be happy in this world, he won't be happy in the next world, he'll never get the thing he wants, we all know that, right? Once he gets it, it's not going to be good enough, he'll want the next thing, right? We all know this. This is like, you know, right, when you finally got that new car, how long did it take till you started noticing other cars on the road, you know? It's just a matter of time, right? It's just the way it is, right? When you have it, you want the next thing, you want the next, and you want it. There's no end to it. So kinat, taiva, kavod, okay, envy, lust, and honor, these are the things that take us out of the world, and usually these are the things that are pulling us constantly. So if a person doesn't have his intellect as the boss, so to speak, of his life, he's going to be being pulled by his heart, and it's usually going to be one of these three things. And if he analyzes it, he does it especially on what we spoke about, the daily accounting, and he sits there and thinks about, gee, what am I so excited, what am I daydreaming about, so to speak, he'll discover, almost always, it's these three bad guys again. The three villains are pulling at him again, and it's jealousy, envy, and honor, and taiva, and lust, and honor. So those are the three things that something to think about. I think you know this. I think this is something that we learned from this story of Yosef, and how he was beyond all that.
I'm so sorry.
No,
I went to the this time.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry about that. Okay. Welcome here. You got a search sheet. Okay, so that was a nice little thought that Rabbi again spoke about a little bit. I kind of brought it out with a few ideas and something to think about what self-mastery is all about, and also give us a certain direction. Where are we headed for? I mean, where are we headed to? What are we trying to get at? You know, with all this discussion of fixing our character, I think this very much is an end result. Here's where we want to get to the point that we can be beyond the circumstance. This can take time, obviously. This is not an overnight fix, but slowly but surely be beyond all that, to be led by intellect. When a person's doing that daily accounting, he's using his intellect to always just take a look at his life and say, well, what am I doing here? The intellect's kind of running the show. It's not just autopilot. It's not just his desires just kind of taking him from place to place. He's very focused. His mind is telling him where he wants to go. He's thinking it through. He's saying, well, where do I want to get to? What am I here for? What am I trying to accomplish? And he's making that the end result. Here's where I want to go, and how am I going to get there? So he puts his life in priority, perspective straight, right? And I think we can understand it. Okay, so now I want to talk about the character traits, about the midos. We started and stopped and started, and maybe I'll put it on the table. What does the word midah mean? Midah in Hebrew, character trait. Where does that word come from? Midah. What was that? Measurement. In Hebrew, midah is a measurement. Limdod is to measure. Midah. Midah means measurement. And it's quite strange that the word for character traits is measurement.
I'm going here because I can't.
Please, make yourself comfortable. So it's quite odd that the word for a character trait is measurement. Why would measurement be the right word? So the Archos Tzadikim, one of the works we wrote in last week's source sheet, his premise for his whole book is that, yes, midos are measurements. You have to know how much of each midah to take. He said, just like if you're making a stew, you're making a big soup, right? You need salt. Well, you need the right amount of salt. Too little salt, it's not going to have any taste. Too much salt, no one's going to want to eat it, right? Too much of an ingredient, no good. Too little, no good. You have to have the right amount. Same thing with character traits. Character traits, there's no all or nothing. There's no like, oh, you're never ever able to get angry about anything, let people walk all over you and that's going to be the end of it. No. There's a certain amount. You shouldn't be a piece of wood that people can do whatever they want to and never react. At the same time, you shouldn't be yelling at every guy, who steps on your foot. You have to find the measurement, the amount that's appropriate. And for every midah, the whole Archos Tzadikim, his premise of his entire work is going from character trait to character trait, trying to tell you, even if you have a certain character trait that's, let's say, negative, there's a positive there. How about stubbornness? As a teacher, we hate stubborn kids. They get on our nerves, right? But I always remind myself, if the Jewish people weren't stubborn, we wouldn't be here today. Let's face it. We're a stubborn group of people, and that's why we're here after all these years and all this going from country to country and tzara to tzara. We're here because of stubbornness. So there's a positive in every character trait. It's finding the positive point of it, right? And it's knowing how to use it. So it's measuring. It's really measuring, and that's what midos are. I mean, it goes beyond that. It's also knowing if you have a tendency to a certain character trait, there's a way to use it positively, and that's another element that the Archos Tzadikim talks about. Like he talks about, if let's say a person has a tendency towards bloodshed, he says, well, you can try to say, bloodshed's a bad thing. You can also use it in a positive way. We need shochtim. We need people to circumcise. We need you guys. So let's use it. Don't just put it away. There's a time and a place, a way to use it. So kind of knowing how much to use of that character trait is always a necessary element. Okay, so when we talk about character traits, in a way, it's endless. It's an endless amount. Some books have 15, and some books have 25, and there's more general kind of character traits and some more specific ones. So how do we break it down? We don't only have this lesson, the next class. We don't have that much to go. How can we grab a hold of all the character traits and kind of have something to take with us? So I thought to use Reb Chaim Vital's approach. Reb Chaim Vital, we mentioned him earlier, I think in first class. He was the student of the Arizal. Okay, so he was a Kabbalist, let's call him. He wrote all the Arizal's works. He's the one who wrote it down. And when he talks about character traits, he says that you can basically break them down into 4 categories, and I have them over here. Eish, Ruach, Mayim, and Afar. And actually, these are the 4 components of anything physical in our world, which is also a very novel concept. Our entire world, anything physical in our world, is made up of some combination of these 4 elements. Fire, wind, water, dirt. That's the Arizal. Okay? He says these are the 4 physical components, the 4 elements that make up everything else. So the human body, anything else that exists within it, liquids, gases, whatever, they all kind of fall into these 4. And he says from these 4 components, that's where we get our character traits from. So he goes on, and I have only in Hebrew here, but I'll be happy to read it. We'll go through it a little bit. He says, let's talk about the fire components. That's the first one. Yesod Eish. What do we get from our fire? What character traits come out of the component that's called fire? He says, Nimshechet Hagava. From there comes Gaiva, conceit, pride. That's where it comes from the fire. Hanekred Gasut Ruach. What else? Kas, anger. Anger comes from the same place. And he says a simple point. Ki mipnei hagava mitzkayes adam she'eno osim ritzano. Why do people get angry when they don't do what they want? Because they have gava. They have pride. They're conceited. If a person would recognize his own fault, he would recognize his place, he would have nothing to get angry about, right? We only get angry when we feel very comfortable, right? Where do we get angry? We get angry at home. We're very comfortable, right? When we're guests, we don't get angry as easily, right? When we know we're not in our place, we're not as comfortable, right? We know we don't get angry as easily. We get angry when we're very, very comfortable. So it stems from the same place, from the same.
What do you call the four things in English?
Fire, wind, water, and dirt.
And all this is in.
Right here. Fire, wind.
But this what you're talking.
Yeah, I'm talking about the fire one, exactly.
Is in
exactly.
Hebrew.
Yeah, I'm sorry about that. All Hebrew, but I'm going to try to translate.
Which one did you mention before? You said something before anger.
Oh, yeah, so pride, conceit.
Oh, okay.
Conceit, he says conceit, from there comes anger. He says from there comes, he says there's more. He says from there comes kapdanut blibo. He says to be, kapdan. To be, I can't even translate that word. What did you say?
Not diligent.
To be makpid, to be strict. Not strict either. Not a good word. But basically to be specific. Like if people don't do, you're very, very, you hold everything to a T. They didn't do this guy didn't do that thing. The waiter was slow. The cold soup was cold. You're makpid on each thing. You know what? Yeah, exactly. So that's the word kapdan.
No, but it's more like Kollel. It's more like
You got to think of English words. The Hebrew we have. But usually in relationships, people who hold tit for tat, everything, it's got a calculation. You didn't do this right, you didn't do that right. There always, nothing can be let go. They don't let things go. So that's called to be makpid. And it comes from the same place because you hold yourself conceited, you hold yourself, pride, etc. That's where this comes from. Bakashat srara, you always want to be on top, you always want to be the leader, you always want to be the one talking. All these comes from the same place. And he says the last one is sinah lezulato. And hating others, hatred of other people, because they might be bigger than you or they pose a threat, comes from the same place. I often find when girls have these catty little arguments with each other, often they're just intimidated by other girls who have more whatever it is that they're jealous of, right? They're more popular, or they look prettier, or they have a nicer phone, or whatever the stupid things they fight about. Is usually there's a certain kind of intimidation, but it comes from the same place. When a person's conceited, he's very, very intimidated by people who have something better than him. And maybe we have it also, If you have a neighbor who's got the nicer car, you feel intimidated by that. So again, it comes from Gava, where we want to be on top. So all those elements fall into one category, what he calls fire, Aish, which is the first step. Okay, the next one, Ruach, wind, or air. I don't know what the English is. I translated wind. Okay, what comes from Ruach? Again, we said there's four elements that make up all components, or four that make up everything physical in our world. So fire, that's the character trait that comes from fire. What comes from wind? He says dibur, speech. What kind of speech? Sicha b'teila, idle chatter. Idle chatter comes from Ruach. Things we talk about that have no benefit to anybody in the world. They're not building people up. They're not doing anything positive. They're just words that we say and just go on and on. What else? Told us about, but there's four things that come out of there. L'darachanav, to try to use words for flattery. Shkarim, lying. Lashon hara, gossip. Right? All these things come from the same place. They're all part of Ruach, the element of Ruach. And all these character traits come out of there. Here's another one he quotes. L'galosh v'chav labrio, to publicize your positive attributes in front of people, is gadol b'fneim, to look good in front of their eyes. Now you would think that's gava, you think that's conceit, but I guess it's somehow connected. It's both. The fact that you're so willing to speak, and words flow out of our mouths so easily, that's all ruach. Anything that comes out of your mouth easily without thought, it can hurt people. What's that? Oh, very ruach, that's right. Full of hot air, we use in English as well, we use similar expressions, right? We words that come out, words can really, really hurt people, and it's always easy to find this in other people, right? In general, we don't recommend this, but you probably know people who say things, and every word they say, they can hurt people right and left, and it just flows like that. They don't even know how to stop themselves. I literally have seen people go like this, like hold their mouths shut after they said something. It's like they're literally trying to stop themselves, and they can't. Their words just fly out like that, and all that comes from the element called wind. Ruach. Okay, there you go. Okay, third one, mayim, water. What is water? What character traits come from water? Yisod hamayim mimenu tavat anugim. People who lust for the different enjoyments and pleasures of our world. just like water somehow has to do with that. And he says, what comes out of there? He said, chemda. You can, chemda means you want other people's stuff. I don't know what the English word for that is. Lechmod, to want other people's things. Covet other people's things. So you want to, let's say you want to take other people's money. Let's say you want to take his wife. This can go deep in someone's subconscious. He doesn't realize he's doing this. Right? It's one of the Aseret Adibra. And jealousy comes out of this as well. A person who is jealous of his friend. He puts chemdan, kina, and jealousy as two different things, coveting and jealousy, interestingly enough. But they all go into the category of lust. Okay? And I think it's pretty self-explanatory. There's a certain amount of lust that is, useful, it builds our world. That's why God put in the world, a certain amount of enjoyment, right? That we're supposed to have in the world. And then there's just lust for the sake of lust. And that's called a negative character trait. And that's the water element. Okay? Finally, the fourth one is afar, the dirt. What comes from dirt? Which character traits come from dirt? So he says first is sadness, depression, right? We all know this one, right? Depression. People who don't want to get out of bed in the morning, etc. People who are depressed, who don't want to do things. And along with that comes laziness. Atzlus. Laziness. To want to fulfill the Torah, to want to fulfill the mitzvahs, right? It can even be laziness to want to get things in this world. Just laziness by nature all comes from that element called afar. So whether a person's lazy, he's slow to move, he doesn't want to go, he doesn't want to do anything, or he's just sad or depressed, all that comes from the same place. Also a person who's unhappy with things that he has in his life, right? He doesn't see the value, he's not living positively, he's always living negatively. All that comes from afar. So with these four elements of our world, we get so many character traits that are so clearly built, and apparently they're built into our being, because these are the four things that make up everything physical in our world. So these are the elements that make up our world. We by nature have these four. Now, there's a school of thought out there, and I don't know if this is true, and I don't have any source for this, but that people have a tendency towards one or the other, and thereby they will label people, oh, he's an afar, oh, she's an aish, oh, he's a mayim, oh, she's definitely a ruach, right? And they have this thing where, like, I even heard there's a rabbi who claims he can look at your name and do different calculations to tell you, oh, you're that, okay? Now, I can't do that, right? I don't know what things they use to do that, but I could tell you is that when you start getting in touch with, cheshbon nefesh, and getting in touch with all the different character traits and really analyzing your ways, you will find that one of these four categories come up a lot, okay? And that's usually a pretty good indication that, yes, indeed, you have a certain tendency towards one over the other. It's very common. I think we have all of them. Like I said, I think all of us have all of them. But usually one will come up a lot, okay? And again, it's always easy to look at other people and say, oh yeah, he's that, for sure, right? But again, in ourselves, we want to make sure this is a very personal kind of work. Probably one of these come up more than the other. And it's helpful to kind of analyze that, like we said, recognize it. We don't want to just run away from our faults. We want to recognize our faults. That's the first step towards fixing them. To recognize which is our aspect that's most pronounced in our lives. And thereby, when you're making your list of, we had last week the chart of the characters, which ones do you want to put on that list? You want to have all of them, but you want to have a few that particularly talk to you, that really, that if I had to pick one that really, really talks to me, I'm going to, out of the 9 or whatever number we had there, 13, I'm going to put 4 or 5 from, X from this particular category, because I see that to me. And usually the way it works is once you start working on one element of it, the others kind of get complemented by that as well. So you don't actually have to work directly. Working around it also helps. So anyway, it's very helpful to have this breakdown. And again, it's coming from a very reliable source. It's Arizal, or Chaim Vital, okay, this is the Kabbalistic sources. So there's definitely a very strong source for this. Okay, so let's put this practically, just so we can make this very, very practical.
Could I just
Yeah,
ask
please.
you, where are these found, these four things, not in the Torah?
So this is in the Kabbalah.
In the what? In the Kabbalah.
Yeah, the Arizal is the source of the Kabbalah in our day.
Wow.
And he says these are the 4 elements that make up everything in our world.
Is that all this from the Kabbalah
Yes.
tonight?
I didn't make it up. No, just this part. This is not a Kabbalah class. This is just, I'm using some wisdom to be able to help break down the character traits. So let's say a person, let's say Aish, let's say for fire. What would a person put on his cheshbon nefesh chart? What would he put on the things he wants to work on his wish list, we'll call it, if you will, for now? What are the things that he wants to work on? So let's say he sees himself as an Aish, he sees this is where his challenge is. So he would want to work generally, but also specifically. Like, for example, admitting when you make a mistake, right? Admitting error, that's a hard one. right? Admitting when you make a mistake. We always say, oh, it takes a man to admit you make a mistake, right? To show that it's a tough thing, right? It's very hard to admit you made a mistake, right? So maybe a person would say, I want to work on this particular area. I'm going to make sure every day I admit something that I did wrong. Maybe you can do that every day, admit you made a mistake. But I think I could. You can admit you made a mistake. I have a study partner, right? So we learn, you're right, I made a mistake, you're wrong. It's easy, You find ways in life, especially you come home, your wife starts saying, why'd you leave the dishes in the sink, whatever it is. It's an easy opportunity, and especially if you're looking for it. If you're looking for it, it makes it a lot easier to do than when you're not looking for it. So I have students, right, say, I'm sorry. It's not just that we have a hard time saying I'm sorry. We also have a hard time saying I'm sorry. But the point is, it would be something you'd put on your list because you see, the reason why you have a hard time admitting error, I have one. Right now, you God forbid, it's all of us have this problem because of gava. It's from this category of Aish. We have it. So if you start working on it, you start saying, no, every day I'm going to admit I did something wrong. I'm going to do it. And that's going to help you. We do that for a week straight. You're going to find that all of a sudden, you don't feel quite as conceited anymore. It'll help. How about, practically, you can put yourself last for something. So you're getting online for something, and you can say, no, after you. Not because I want to be a gentleman, but because I want to practically put my gava lower. I want to lower myself. I want to show, gava comes out, I think I'm better than other people. I should get first, right? Whatever it is. Getting in the doorway. I need to be first. I'm more important. Getting past the green light. No, you go first. That exercise, doing that once a day, will do amazing things to a person's gava, will lower his level of being conceited. And again, doesn't have to be an internal thing necessarily. Doing that action daily will literally change his life. It will change his perspective. Lowering himself for other people, whatever the situation is. One thing Baal Gava has, they say in other books, is that he has a hard time lowering himself to the problems of low people. Like, in let's say in Israel, New York, often people knock on the door for charity, for handouts, right? And often, if you open the door and start talking to them, they'll give you a story, right? And usually a conceited person will have a very hard time lowering himself to listen to this person's story. Either you take the dollar or whatever, the check, or whatever you're giving them, and just leave me alone. I don't want to lower myself to have to hear your problems. Okay? The concept of anava, modesty, and then the opposite of gava is to lower yourself and hear somebody else, someone who's low. Lower yourself to hear his nebuch tzaros. And that also, again, is another way that we can work on this character trait. Okay? How about ruach? Okay, a person has trouble with their words, or let's say we all have to some extent. We speak a little too quickly. What can we do to help work on a character trait? So one thing that's nice is simple, silence. They said in Kelm, people used to often make what they call tanit, tanit dibur. Instead of a tanit fast from eating, they would fast from speaking. And you can do it for a day. They should do it for days at a time. In Kelm, they were very holy people. But you can do it for an hour. You can do an outright tanit dibur, right? And that would help you. That when you do start speaking, all of a sudden it becomes an effort. You actually have to think about it. So it's something you can consider if you can. That's not so practical, right? How about this one? How about listening when another person's talking? I discovered that this is actually a skill that I don't have. No, it's actually a skill. If someone wants to talk, we are very inclined to want to cut them off as soon as we can and get it in. And, I have something to add. Well, how about swallowing that for a moment and actually hearing everything the other person wants to say? It's an amazing amount of self-control to do this. That's what I found. Very, very hard, but incredibly rewarding. Because when you do this, you're actually working. You're actually doing two. You're working on lowering yourself to hear somebody else's possible problems, so to speak. But at the same time, you're also working on this ruach, the ruach that just kind of spits out words by itself. Here you are being more careful, right? Another beautiful approach, again, to take ruach and say, I'm not going to say things that are evil anymore. A whole day is not practical, but you can pick an hour and say, from this to this time, I'm going to be very careful with what I say. I won't say anything negative about another person at this hour. I know I once visited someone's home where they had at their Shabbos meal, they had a sign on the table that reminded them, during our Friday night Shabbos meal, we don't talk gossip. You can talk about whatever you want. I guess no politics, huh? no gossip at the table. And it was their hour. That's it. The rest of the time, they're normal, I guess, But you start with a meal. You start with an hour. You start with one section of time that you can do. And that's in general the concept. You can't bite off more than you can chew. You have to take an amount you can do. We probably need to speak a lot more about that, but just to throw that at you, worthwhile. So take a moment, take an hour that you say, if it's a not to do, take an hour. I won't do it for that hour or 15 minutes or whatever it is, and see how that goes. I'm giving very practical advice to put in the Cheshbon Nefesh column. Okay, how about Mayim? Okay, lust. What do you do for that? So obviously, there's a character trait called Prishus. Prishus means abstaining, literally abstaining. Okay, now abstaining is a large topic. Do we believe in abstinence? Do we believe that we're supposed to abstain from pleasures in this world? Are we supposed to enjoy things in this world? Well, yes, we are supposed to. We are supposed to enjoy the pleasures of the world, but not to an extent of lusting. It's supposed to be just to the amount that we need to keep our world alive, right? We're supposed to eat. We're supposed to enjoy what we eat. We're supposed to do everything, but just to the amount that we're supposed to, not just for the sake of pleasure, right? Just for the sake of just pleasuring ourselves all day long. So to work on that, we should help minimize, right? Like we said, when you bend the bar, first you bend the metal bar a little bit too much to the left so it straightens out, right? If it's a bent bar, you want to straighten it out, you don't just straighten it, you bend a little bit in the other direction. Abstinence, you have to abstain a little bit from what's even permitted, even expected. Abstain a little bit from that, and then you'll hopefully get it right. The correct amount of pleasure and abstinence will be the right balance. So one advice they bring is, leave the last piece on the plate. You hear that one, right? They call it Tainus Haravad. The Ravid said you don't have to do a fast. You fast all day. Fast in if you ordinarily would take 3 side dishes with your main course, take 2. If you ordinarily take 2 scoops of ice cream with the whipped cream and the chocolate syrup, just leave one of the toppings off. Just one thing. Don't do anything crazy. Leave the last bite on your plate and just eat the rest. That kind of thing. Show who's the boss. Who's the boss. They used to say, you have the plate and you have the person. Who's running the show? If the person's got his face in there, so that means the plate's the boss and you're this little puppet. Eat me, eat. Okay. Now you have to show you're the boss. You're the boss on the plate, right? So a certain extent, where you kind of lay down the limits. It doesn't matter how you do it. Rabbi Brevda, who I like to consider a teacher of mine, I heard him a lot of times. He used to give this advice. He said he used to, people he felt which were working on. He said when you go to a wedding or where they have the smorgasbord, right? He said fill up your plate as much as you want, but no doubles. That was his thing. Fill it. You can fill it up like this. You can't go back. Right? And he just said, come on, what does that do? He says, what it does is it shows you're the boss. It shows that you're the boss. You're making the rules, you're setting a limitation on yourself, and the pleasures don't rule you. You rule. Just like we spoke about earlier, ruling. You have to be the boss. And that was his approach.
You could take 5 hot dogs, but...
Yeah, he would say, fill it up. Hey, people had a hard time with it. They said it's so easy. He said, yeah, let's see. People saw that it's really hard. When you have a limitation, it's a different world. And it really does raise the person up. Okay. Afar, a person who finds the characteristic of dirt, he wants to work on afar. So what does he need to work on? So obviously, zrizut, the opposite of laziness is zrizut. How do you say zrizut in English? I don't even know. Zrizut means to move. Zealous? Alacrity. I don't know. That's funny. Alacrity. I don't even know what these words mean. But basically, it means get moving. And what's amazing about get moving is that it really requires zero thought. In fact, here is one area where thinking is actually negative. Have you ever tried setting your alarm an hour earlier to do something good? You will find every reason. If you start thinking about it, if that alarm goes off, you start thinking, you'll find every reason to hit the snooze button and roll back over. If you think you're out, zrizus is actually the opposite. Here's one time you don't want to think. It's you decided I'm getting up at whatever time it is, 5:15, whatever it is, you get up at 5:15. That's it. What? No, there's no discussion. If you discuss, you lose. If you have a conversation with yourself, you're out. Right? So that concept of here, zrizut means I'm stubborn. I lay down a limit on myself. Before I went to sleep, I decided I need to get up at this time for X, Y, and Z, hopefully a good thing. I'm going to get out of bed no matter what. And there you see it works. So zrizus is not a process of thinking. Zrizus is a process of action. It's a very interesting thing. I've seen people who were in a kollel called a kollel chatzot. They used to get up in the middle of the night to study Torah. This is an amazing thing. Not too many people can do this. I met one guy. He said he would get up every day at 1 in the morning. Now, when did he go to sleep, you ask, right? He'd get up at 1 in the morning and go study. And I asked him, when do you sleep? How do you do it? Whatever. He's like, okay, I take a nap, put my head down in the afternoon for a half hour, I'm good to go. I said, how do you get out of bed? How do you do it? What does that mean? 1 in the morning, you just went to sleep, 2-3 hours earlier. How does it work? And he said this exactly. There's just, you decide, and that decision, there's no discussion at 1 in the morning. If the alarm goes off, that's it. It's the decision. The decision is the alarm went off. Up and at him. soldier, right? If you were in the army, this is easier, right? for us, the comfortable bed. So anyway, so that's the way Zrizus works. Zrizus means action. You take action. You recognize that afar is an element, a characteristic, and we all do for sure. Laziness is something huge. Makes it hard to move, right? I can tell you, getting out to Milchamarav at night is just so difficult, right? It's so challenging. You want to just sit down on the couch and not move, right, after a full day, right? But there's no discussion. It's time I decide I'm doing it, I get up and I go. If you start talking about it, it's not going to happen. So anyway, that's how we start beating the afar no longer. The dirt no longer rules over us. We rule over the dirt. Okay, so these are, I think, just very practical. I want to throw out very practical ideas how to take all the characteristics, first of all, character traits, and put them into 4 categories. 4 categories is something we can take with us, right? And the second thing is very practical advice on what we can do as a daily kind of activity. And I think this should be a weekly kind of goal. Take a weekly goal and say, I'm going to work on Zrizus this week. And don't just say Zrizus generally. Say very specific. I'm going to, because if I recognize, I have afar characteristics. Let me work on moving in this and this and this activity. 3 things I'm going to do this week, that shows Zrizus. That get me moving when I otherwise wouldn't move.
Not to be late for something.
Not to be late for something, but to be 5 minutes early. What a concept. Right? And to make sure I'm there, and because I said so, not because there's a discussion. And you'll find that that'll actually help you improve over the course of time. This will actually make a big difference. Or any of these ideas, take small amounts and do them. And this is very important to recognize that if it's true that we have tendencies towards one more than the other, it's very important when we see other people not to be judgmental and say, oh boy, look at that ruach over there, can't close their mouth. Recognize we're all different. We all have our own tendencies, and he may have ruach, and I might be, I might be eish, and I have nothing to brag about, just because I'm arrogant, I don't recognize it, right? But we may have the same. We all have our peckles. So it's very important when you're studying these things, and this is a tendency when people start studying Musar, right away. Oh, I know that one. This guy, that guy. It has to be turned inwards, recognizing this is you. Musar should never be used as a way to put down other people. I'll say one quote as it's getting late. But Nissim, again, the same Rabbi Yagin, he said a beautiful statement, he said a beautiful line. He said, saying I'm sorry, right? I mentioned saying I'm sorry or admitting a mistake or whatever it is. He said, if you're ever in an argument, always be sure to say I'm sorry first, especially if you're wrong. I mean, even if you're wrong, but especially if you're right. Even if you're wrong, but especially if you're right. And he has a very, very, very smart line. Why is that? Well, first of all, because both people think they're right. Always. Always. And number 2, it's a lot easier for the person who's right to say I'm sorry than the person who's wrong to say I'm sorry. And it's a lot easier for the other person to say I'm sorry once the first person said I'm sorry first. So if you think about it, especially if you're right, make sure you say I'm sorry first. And it really makes a difference. Anyway, if you take that concept and say I'm sorry, throughout the week I'm going to say I'm sorry 3 times. I don't know if I can handle that one. But the concept of admitting a mistake or things like that, putting yourself second, I think we can see big differences at the end of the week. All right? Okay.
Thank you.
I would have known a week later that the smoke alarm would still be doing that. I would have brought a 9-volt.
You heard it?
Yeah.
You
heard it the whole time?
heard it tonight?
Yeah.
I changed the battery.
Oh, you did?
But I never heard it on the first one.
Maybe it's a different. You didn't hear it? Maybe it's a different.
There's another one now going on. I changed out 3 batteries. You know, there's 3 batteries we changed. Unless I put in the wrong one. You really hearing it on this?
Yeah.
That's why I was like, oh,
It's amazing. I'm hearing it.
that's what I wrote on. I just
I can hear all day. I won't hear it. I don't hear a thing.
Did you say?
So they'll have kind of
How do I turn this off?